So far, we have used our Blazor application as a standalone application, hosted on the index.html. Now, I will now convert our Blazor application so that it becomes an ASP.NET Core hosted Blazor application. I'm going to host the Blazor application in the same application as from where I run my API, and that is indeed an ASP.NET Core application. So in fact, what I'm changing is who is hosting the Blazor app. I'm including it in the ASP.NET Core app I've shown you for the API. The app is still a Blazor WebAssembly application. It is still downloaded to the client. The only thing that is changing is that the server on which this will now be hosted requires .NET, not for the Blazor part, but for the API. In this next demo, I'm going to take you through what I've changed so that my Blazor app now becomes an ASP.NET Core hosted Blazor WASM app. Wow, that's a mouthful. So far, when we ran our Blazor application, this project here was in fact the starter project. Indeed, when we ran our application, it was the index.html in here that was called. Now I'm going to change the configuration of the API project so that then becomes the hosting project for our Blazor application. Our Blazor application will remain a Blazor WebAssembly application, but it will be hosted as part of the API project, and that is a .NET Core project. There is in fact inside of Visual Studio a template that also does this for you, but I like to configure it myself so that I know what is going on, and you do too. So I'm going to configure my API project so that it is capable of hosting the Blazor application. First, we're going to bring in a NuGet package, the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components WebAssembly Server package. This is needed because it contains the necessary middleware so that Blazor can actually be served via our API project, which is a regular ASP.NET Core project. With that package added, save this. Let's then go to our program CS. Make sure to go to the program CS of the API project, not the Blazor application. We'll now configure this so that it can then host the Blazor application. I'll bring in some middleware. Below the builder.build, I've now added first this part here. This is going to bring in the middleware necessary for Blazor WebAssembly debugging. This I only need if the environment is development. Next, I need to bring in the Use Blazor Framework Files middleware component. That will be necessary to serve the Blazor application from the API project. Use Static Files was already there. It is definitely necessary because indeed our Blazor application will be served as static files. I'm also going to add here an endpoint. I'm going to say that if an incoming request cannot be routed to one of the configured controllers through their routing, I'm going to redirect them to index.html. That is the index.html, still part of my Blazor application. But since my Blazor application will now be hosted from my API project, it is this index.html that will route the users to. I need to also make a change to the launch settings. In the launch settings, there is now a launch URL for Swagger defined. I don't want that. I'm going to replace that with the following, and you can find this one in the snippets. The inspect URI is necessary for Visual Studio to know that it needs to debug Blazor and how to do so. And to be sure, I need to do that in both profiles, depending on which one we'll use to run the application from. Finally, one more thing, we need to add a reference from the API project to the Blazor WebAssembly project. With those things done, we can now run the API project. As you can see, it was still configured as a starter project, and that will now run our Blazor application from its root. Indeed, we are now running on another port, 7039. It's the port that was defined here as the application URL in the API project, and we're not requesting any API endpoint to be returning an answer. No, we're just navigating to the root, and that is served by the index.html. We're redirected to our Blazor application, which works as it did before. So now our Blazor application is served from the API project, and it's just this project that we'll need to deploy later in this course.